this meeting of the Monroe County Stormwater Board. Terry, did you feel that we had gotten through the budget projection transition plan the way you wanted to? See there?
You're gonna have to take over here if you can't hear. Do you want to come over? Okay.
Do we need to officially reconvene?
He
Because
just
if we
did.
haven't,
He just
okay.
did.
Penny just did.
Okay. I
That's
didn't know if
fine.
there was a vote that needs to be taken.
No, no.
Penny is going to chair this meeting since I wasn't able to be here for the beginning of it.
All right, is Terry with us?
I'm gonna try to get him to come take my seat and take over where I am. Why don't you come over here?
We need you to. When I was looking back
I'll
through
help him from here.
the transition plan that was there, I wondered, Terry, do you feel that we got through the transition plan the way you wanted to, especially with all the different expenditures that you were proposing and the new positions, things like that?
Can you hear me first of all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. If you guys went through it, I think just as long as that got transferred over to Greg Geertaz and he includes that in his proposal, I'll be working with him, I assume, if he has any questions on it.
Okay, one of the reasons I was raising that is because, and I'm sorry, my husband will be coming through here in a minute. There was a big proposal about shifting the amount of the stormwater fees in there. And so we didn't take any kind of vote on that. I know it'll have to go through the ordinance, but I would like help here in knowing whether or not this group needs to make a recommendation.
I think
This group needs to take action. We're not a we are the stormwater board. This is our approval. So whatever happens, we approve it. So this is the first step. We're not we're not somebody that provides recommendation. If we don't want to proceed, we don't have to.
Right, but it was my understanding that the ordinance that was passed by the Monroe County Commissioners set a 3% rate increase.
The policy.
Right,
Okay.
the council has to approve as well.
So
A big part of this was Dave was coming back with what we can do with the policy and the existing ordinance, and then a schedule. And so that's a big reason why we kind of continued the meeting.
right.
Penny, Dave, excuse me, Penny, Dave's got a schedule that answers the questions about scheduling. He's received a proposal from FSG that will firm up the analysis on the financial end of it, using my projections on what I think we need over the next few years as far as staffing, that sort of thing. And I think the proposal that he asked from them will provide that. And the proposal is, he has the proposal to be executed as an action today. I think Dave can offer a little more insight onto that if he might. As far as,
Could we get that on the screen? Sorry to ask that, Connie.
Yeah.
Or Terry or somebody.
Yeah, we're working on it here.
Thank you. It'd be helpful for the public, I
There
think.
you go.
Right.
Scroll up and down. Here it is.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get the schedule and everything on the website for the public too.
Yeah, that's just a tentative schedule, and if the report is done more quickly, we can move that up if you want. And I guess you probably don't have to take action on the proposal today. You could move that to your next meeting, your July meeting, if you'd like to think about that. But I think what we were talking about was having Greg's report deal with a couple different options. For example, keeping the rate the same. What kind of projects and coverage could we do for that? Have an option about adding certain level of staffing, have an option dealing with certain projects, things like that. So you'd have a number of issues to have a hearing on and to think about.
I would suggest that we address this at our July meeting, since this is a continuation of our June meeting, and I'd want the public to be aware that it's going to be on our agenda, because this just arrived a couple days ago, I believe, right? So
That's correct.
yeah,
Tuesday.
so yeah, so and part of that for me is also, we had talked about moving our meetings to Wednesdays anyway, because we have that on that same day. We've got a 4 o'clock meeting every month on that exact same day of our Thursday meeting. And I thought we had talked about moving our meetings to a Wednesday anyway, and that would be a good time to do it in July, I think.
Julie, I've got several things that coming up on the agenda with this, and Dave now has a draft of the ordinance, so the agendas are going to be full. If we can get a little more than an hour, I think that would be great.
Yep, that'll give us plenty of time.
Okay, I'll move them to Wednesday.
The second Wednesday of the month, is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
It
Okay,
is. So Terry, be sure and Dina,
I
so
did. What
that
was that,
she
Lisa?
can notify. Be sure and get with Dina so she can notify BCATs and everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
So the next Stormwater Management Board meeting would be 3 o'clock on July 8th.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll get that word out and see if I'll have to look at the webpage and see if make sure it's posted right and everything.
So I have a few questions regarding item B, since it looks like that's kind of where we're following up on with the scheduling and things. One, I think, Dave, if you could just clarify a little bit of how the procedure works with amending the county policy already. Does that have to come as a request from the stormwater to amend the policy, or is that something that the commissioners could just take up freely? Because obviously it's up to them to accept the change of a existing local policy.
Well, that's up to the commissioners. They can handle that any way they like. They have the ultimate say, so they could just do it, or they could run it through a stormwater board hearing. And I can have a couple options for your next meeting.
Okay, and but
if that's desired.
right. So thank you. That's my understanding. But as far as moving, the increase in things and such does pertain to the stormwater management board. So the local policy of the 3% increase is a local policy that the commissioners can take up as they choose, but to move and do the increases, that is a stormwater decision. So
Well, it's a stormwater has to conduct a hearing and then make a
first,
recommendation.
and then
Yeah.
it moves through.
Yeah.
But we're not making a recommendation, we're making a request. It's not a recommendation, it's a request. We're requesting them to approve those.
Okay.
So it might be semantics, but I just want to make sure that the authoritative of the Stormwater Management Board is clear on the way
Okay.
that this moves forward. So to some of the points I had, and this could tie into the request from FSC Group 2, but I will make the same comments at our next meeting. This goes with the proposal that we saw last month. some things I see about the ratepayer fee, how does this complement and or implement AMEC's Foster Wheeler Long Range Stormwater Improvement Plan? I would like to see how this coincides with the 25-year long range stormwater improvement plan and proposed projects with the potential fee increase. This plan/document costs the county over $100,000 and needs to be fully utilized. Also, we need to see some type of mechanism to dedicate funds so we can create opportunities and or partnerships with ratepayers that have pre-existing stormwater issues. Also, I would like to see some mechanism that can dedicate funds to educational outreach as well. So those are my comments for item B that I don't think were fully addressed in what I saw as a draft. And like I said, those could be carried over with the FSC Corp, which I fully will support, but we will take that up next meeting since this is new information that was provided. So that's what I have to kind of, sum up my opinions, thoughts, and feelings with the budget projections and transition plan. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
And obviously, when I say
Lisa?
my opinion, I would love to hear what the board does too, because, I really want to see how they feel so they're getting more direction than just me.
Okay, Lisa, did you have something?
Yeah, and the only thing, and Terry can add more to this, the only thing I can say about the long range plan, this is where we originated a lot of these projects from. We took that plan and we prioritized, and we had a lot of these projects put under design. A lot of the costs that are in the long range plan, we feel are just like design fees. They were not construction fees that were associated with a lot of these costs. And now that after you get them designed and you see what the construction cost is, for the 4 projects we've talked about is around $8 million. So I do feel that we have used that long range plan as a good tool of where to begin. And that is, those big projects are so outside of what we take in as a normal request every single day in the department of the needs for the residents of Monroe County. These, we have, like I said, if you look at the transition plan, over 200 requests of people that are dealing with issues every single day that we can provide to anybody, that data, the problems that people are having. So I do feel like that we have provided the justification and that we are using the long range plan to the best of our ability of where we prioritize and how we move forward. So, and Terry can add more to that. I just, I do feel the county didn't throw away $100,000 or we're not utilizing that plan. That is where we began this process, from that plan.
Right, and some of those comments came from the FSG when they were talking about some 5-year goals. I just want to continue to bring awareness that we integrate some of the capital improvement plans that were put in place and adopted in 2014 or 2016, sorry. Absolutely, Lisa, you did a great job of relating that to your guys' proposal. It's a 25-year plan. It would be cool to create a matrix so we can see how we're executing it as well moving forward. So sorry if I
have a question, if I might.
Yes, please.
So my question is that, sorry, I raised my hand, now I can't get it down. So my hand's gonna fall asleep. So my question is, is there a sense from Terry and Connie that there is a need for additional educational expenditures, right? That may be something that's desired, but what are we going to do with that? And is there, I guess that's the question. If that is true, then I would say update that budget request, if that is true.
I mean, I'm bringing this
Oh.
up not to say there is or isn't. I'm saying that we need to look at that aspect. So if they can answer that like black and white, yes or no, that's fine. But I feel like there's so much middle ground where education is important. So I just want to make sure it's fully being looked at throughout the project. The only real thing we have right now is a cooperative with SWCD. I would like to see some type of mechanism where the stormwater is out there trying to educate people as well. And that's such a hard question. I'll let you guys shoot, but since I'm stirring the pot, I just wanted to jump in front of the gun.
Ron and Julie, from our last meeting where there was an interest from the board on expanding our education, I've challenged Connie to come up with ideas, and with the idea that she and I would come together with and critique the ideas she has and see if we can add additional means of education that seem to be have good payoff, and add some stuff into my report. So I took that from the last meeting, and she's working on it, and she's excited about it. I think the role I was going to take was just be critical of her ideas and feel like they were going to have a good payoff. So we're working on that to expand those a little bit, and that's something I can edit my report and take back and give a summary to the board anytime. So.
Right. I guess the question is if there is the need for an additional person, part-time, if that has to be taken into account, then we should take that into account before we meet in July.
At this point, Julie, what we've been doing is taking advantage of the fellows from SPIA for additional manpower, and that's worked out well.
Okay. Great. Excellent. Thank you.
As Connie and I are talking, I'll be thinking about manpower and try to bring back a little better answer to you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have anything else about the budget projection transition plan that they want to bring up? Or can we move on to item C?
I would just like to request Hans to put any non-speakers on mute. I'm getting a lot of feedback.
That's probably me.
Yeah, who should be speaking currently?
Everybody
I think we're
who's
taken care of.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we're okay. I think
Cool.
everybody who's present is a participant here. So do we, I need to ask a question, and I'm not sure whether this goes to Dave or to my more experienced colleagues. Do we need to vote on accepting the transition plan? Or do we just need to note that we've reviewed it and discussed it?
If that is something that the staff is supposed to take as an official document and move forward on, then board approval would be helpful, I think.
I didn't
Penny?
think this was listed as an action item. I thought this
No.
was listed as
Yeah.
a discussion
Okay.
item. And then that FSG study could complement this, so we might want to just wait for that as well, if we are going to get support next meeting for that study.
Penny, I'd like to
Yes.
also add that that document I put together so that I would have something, the person that replaces me, I can offer them that and show them the things I've had on my mind, more of a guidance. I wasn't really thinking of a document that would be approved and any further than that.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, are we ready to move on to item C then, the ordinance draft plan that's been submitted, which I found a little hard to follow. I don't know about the rest of you, but just the way that all the spacing came out, it was just difficult for me.
At this point, I would consider that a first draft from David. And he's made the modifications so that it's more appropriate in his mind, and he's given it to me to review it and see that it's, make sure that it marries well with the technical standards. And I've just started doing that. So at this point, it's still a rough draft, I would say, and you should be taking it as that.
I do have, I realized today that I hadn't finished the email with questions about that are just language, verbiage, things like that that are really basic. I'm just going to send to Dave. I'll finish the email and send it to Dave. It's been sitting for 2 weeks, so I'll get that to you. I'll send it to Terry too, just so you see what I'm questioning or what I have questions about. But I do have some sort of policy questions I want to talk about, if we might.
Please.
And I'll use the page numbers provided on the PDF from the actual document that Dave sent.
Okay.
If that's okay, because I ended up printing it out because I couldn't get a good vision on my screen either. But there's the document saved as a PDF, and Dave sent it out separately. I'll use the numbers too, so that we know what we're on. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. So chapter 1, number 5, covered activities and exemptions. In A1A, there is a discussion of the activities that are covered in this ordinance, and it's pretty comprehensive. But I wonder if we could have a quick chat about whether or not we want to talk about other land disturbing activities that impact our water quality, like fertilizers, herbicides, ground pollution that may be carried away in the stormwater system. Is there a reason why we haven't even talked about that anywhere in here?
We have a definition of land disturbing activity that's in the appendix. And that's any man-made change to the land surface, including removing vegetative cover that exposes the underlying soil, excavating, filling, transporting, and grading. And then at the end of chapter 1, I've attached proposed definitions for agricultural land disturbing, forestry timber land disturbing, and mining land disturbing, to make a distinction between the traditional agricultural and forestry and mining uses, where you're actually extracting or growing or planting, and then related activities such as the construction of roads or ponds or things like that, that we want to make sure are covered by this. And that's consistent with Rule 5 and IDEM's guidance on Rule 5. They exempt those traditional harvesting and planting activities, but any log landings, roads, things like that are included in the Rule 5 calculations. So this coverage language reflects that policy of IDEM. When you're talking about fertilizers and stuff like that, I mean, I guess that would just be, Terry, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the second chapter where you're talking about prohibited discharges? I mean, basically, no person shall discharge to a stormwater system any substance other than stormwater, basically. So that's, if we find that someone is discharging that into the system, we can go after them. But if somebody's just applying it to their ground, that's going to be a lot harder to detect.
Yeah, there's a section in there on illicit discharges that limits that, and I don't think there's nothing in there. There's nothing in there about applying fertilizers to ground and that sort of thing.
Mass herbicides and all of that. I guess I'm concerned mostly in the eco zones. It just seems like there's a big gaping hole where I mean, yeah, how do you enforce it? How do you, I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like we have an opportunity to address a major pollutant.
Okay. Let me look into it and see what I can find that others have done and maybe come up with some direction that way.
Okay, that's the only question I have from chapter 1. I have others.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm excited about this input, to be honest with you.
Sorry, not sorry. So in chapter 2, where you list in number 2, exempted discharges and connections, I just wonder if septic is considered a discharge or not.
What page number is that?
I'm sorry, page
12.
12,
Page,
12 in the PDF. Chapter 2, number 2.
Yeah, this relates to the following categories of non-stormwater discharges or flows are exempted.
Right. So is there a reason we didn't include septic in there? Is that just accepted as you're obviously not going to do anything about it, so don't mention it?
I
Septic.
don't, go ahead, Terry.
Septic fields are not a surface water discharge. If it's septic on the surface, then it's falling under our listed discharge section.
Okay. Got it. That's all I.
Oh, sorry. I have something that kind of goes within that, and that was just as we move forward. I was wondering about having kind of internal stakeholder meetings, obviously public stakeholders and other stakeholder meetings, just like any other ordinance, but like with the health department, since they do a lot of things with septics, with planning and building, and obviously with just stakeholders, developers, and of course landowners, like I think we need to get some of their input to make sure that we're addressing some of their concerns as well, because there is a lot of significant overlap when it comes to how this impacts property owners and developers. And a lot of the checks and balances we have in place administratively, they go through the health department, planning, building, and such. So I think we need to bring them into this conversation as well before we really have any final drafts to take action on, because we might be missing a big part of how we could better deal with failing septics and things of that nature. And even
Okay.
putting them in the wrong area too, you know.
well, some of that goes beyond what I understand stormwater is, but could we go back and go through some of this chapter by chapter that with that, starting with the first chapter?
I'm fine with that.
And I have to say, I went through this with what came in the packet. And so some of my pages don't line up with what pages are that Julie just referred to. So we sort of need to go through it according to the sections, I think.
Yeah, Penny, that we just got a updated iteration, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. So you're using one that's just a few days old.
Right. But that's the one I
That's what you have.
actually took notes on, so.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
you want to go through chapter 1? Go ahead. They're
Yeah.
pretty close. You can follow through them.
Right. So Lee, Tron, anyone else have comments on chapter 1?
I'm going to reserve a lot of my comments so I could put them in written form. So as of now, since through this review kind of first stage of the draft ordinance rewrite, I'm going to kind of withhold a lot of my more detailed questions to what's going on and leave it more to the basics, the more broad scheme of things, public input, and how we're going to move forward. So I'll provide written comments and I'll disseminate those through our email listing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if I may say something with respect to Tron's comment earlier, I think the idea is, of course, to get this document in front of the local engineering firms and have them take a hard look at it, have the drainage board take a hard look at it. And we see this process, I think, is taking, a couple months at least to get through this kind of review to see if everybody's comfortable with it. It means that it's a large document, and so it's just going to take time to review that.
Dave's making a good point, but I'd like to make another. Dave's put together the drainage ordinance, and I've got a technical standards that are approximately 170 pages that I want to make sure they're coordinated with the ordinance. And that's what I'm just trying to get through that, or just starting to do that now with this draft that he sent. I'd like to make sure those two documents are in a rough draft form before we send it out too much.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, for example, there's a requirement to apply for a stormwater permit. And in the technical standards, it has a list of all the kinds of documentation that you need to include in your stormwater permit application. And then it'll have specifications, design specifications for those, to use to prepare those application materials. So there's a lot of it is in the technical standards. And so that's what Terry's talking about, going through and making sure that, like, our ordinance language in the front part matches up with the technical standards part, because we have changed a few of the terms. And I want to go through, and there's an extensive definition section. Want to go through and make sure that all those definitions actually appear in the ordinance, because if they don't, there's no reason to have them there. So there's work to be done on this, but we wanted to get it out and get people talking about it and thinking about it.
My questions today are really just philosophical ones. I've limited to that.
I do have a comment.
I was gonna say, as we move forward on some of this and it actually gets implemented, will this also be available to people for their applications through the OpenGov software that we talked about, that we approved this morning?
Yes.
Good. It'll make things much more streamlined. I'm sorry, Tron.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, I was glad to be there and pay my compliments to all the hard work that went into that. So this is really going to help with that process as well. But back to kind of, I guess, the first item C, just another general statement that kind of goes into all of the chapters. Sorry, Dave, but I would really love to see some type of itemized list where changes of discretion or authority are being suggested. As in one incident, it starts taking some of the discretionary or approval ability from the drainage board and starts giving it to the Board of Commissioners, which I would like to not have to sift through everything. I really like the version where it has kind of the blue line, so I kind of see where changes are. The one that was sent out last night has taken out the strike through, so you don't really know where things are being changed. So two things: I really would like to stay on a version where we see where changes are being done, so we understand where we were and where we're moving. And also, I would like to see where we're changing some of this authoritative or discretionary measures that are in place. I've actively and outspokenly continue to say I'd like to see the drainage board have more teeth in the game. If you go through this, it even discuss some areas where the drainage board, can make requirements and say, you need to do this and this, but without them having any authoritative measure, it's just a recommendation. And I don't like that. And then again, that will then put the MS4 coordinator always in the hot seat of saying, this is what I want. If we have an independent body with geologists, drainage engineers, and such saying, this is what we want to see, then, they need to have some authoritative in that too. Or, we're always going to put the MS4 coordinator in the hot seat, or they're just going to be served as recommendations. And I'm not questioning anybody here today. This is for the longevity of our county. And I really would like to see where it's more itemized versus sifting through and finding out what things are being changed around as far as authoritative and approval bodies goes.
I think, John, in the what came with the packet from 2 weeks ago, it's got a lot of those changes marked the way you want to see.
It does. The packet we were, Julie and I were sifting through together came yesterday, and it doesn't have that. I would like to still see that moving forward before we go to a version where it doesn't have those strike throughs. Sorry, Dave. I know
that's no problem. And I have that on my system, although there's so many different changes that I don't know how useful that would be to you, but I'll send it to you, make that available to you, of course. I think basically the way the discretion goes is that the Drainage Board retains its discretion to approve submissions, subdivisions, things like that. Minor things tend to go to the MS4 coordinator. And if the MS4 coordinator feels uncomfortable, then he or she can send it to the Drainage Board. Drainage Board decisions, then if somebody wants to appeal that, that's where the commissioners come in. If they want to appeal something that the Drainage Board has done, it would go to the commissioners before it would go to a court. So that's the rough outline of what the authority scheme is.
Right, like the BZA, the Board of Zoning Appeals, it's an independent group. That's why I like the Drainage Board. I'll continue to be outspoken of how I feel like we need to utilize them and continue to leverage the Drainage Board as an authoritative body. I get it. I'm not calling into question anyone here today. I think we're all excellent, but it's just, I don't like that particular thing. But again, I'm wondering where else in the ordinance does it start shifting that?
Can I make a recommendation? Because if we're going to reorganize this so the public can understand it as well, which it seems like some of that's already happened, which I think is a good thing, then if there's an issue of authority that could be highlighted or something in yellow, or a major change can be highlighted in yellow instead of going from one version to a next, because once you start reorganizing and moving sections around, it gets very confusing and very hard to follow.
Yeah, we can
And
probably.
I might only add, like,
Yes, Lisa. What?
sorry, since we were kind of, and it sounds like we're doing a little bit of reorganizing and things. I'm not sure how it's stated, but I do believe in the code, it says the Drainage Board consists of a drainage engineer. We technically don't have a drainage engineer on board. Terry is an MS4 coordinator. I'm a highway director, and I do not have drainage expertise. I'll be the first to say it, but so I'm not comfortable of sitting on that board. I think if you can get more local engineers, even our highway engineer, as since we're going through all this change of getting those type of things updated to where the experts can sit on this board, and we don't want to abolish this board. It's a great board, and it deals with the more technical aspects, and it has a lot of great local engineers serving on this board. So if we can either include more of those local engineers, or even our highway engineer outside of the highway or the drainage engineer, I think it's in the ordinance, then I think that helps. And then we're getting everything kind of updated at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, back to the document, I guess. We were moving forward to Chapter 2, prohibited discharges and connections. Were there any other questions or comments of the group?
Just, it's shaping up real nicely. Again, I'm kind of more on the large scope, 10,000 foot.
10,000 meter view?
Meter, foot, yeah.
Okay, Chapter 3, the stormwater quantity management. There's a lot of strike out there.
I have a couple of things.
Yes.
on that one. So in chapter 3, section 1, or somewhere in chapter 3 or somewhere at the beginning, I would like an acknowledgement of climate change and the impact that this has had. I think it's important to have that somewhere in this document. It doesn't have to be here, but I kind of noticed its absence here as well. Because it does change the frequency of 10-year storm events are now, 5-year, 1-year, 2-year. That changes stormwater. It changes our community in a big way. I do want to say big old kudos for 1A, the first sentence. It is recognized that most streams and drainage channels serving Monroe County do not have sufficient capacity to receive and convey stormwater runoff resulting from continued urbanization. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
That's huge. In part 2, I guess I just wanted to ask a couple questions. The first is, I would assume that the Drainage Board is going to review the technical standards manual, even though it's technical, but since it's what we're going to be operating under, will they be reviewing that before?
Julie, it's my plan to have them review the whole manual, ordinance, and the technical standards. I've got in my mind to, at some point, make it public, to send it to all of the local engineers practicing here, the Drainage Board, and any other groups that would have any interest in it. We might even, we could think about sending it to like a Home Builders Association or whatever. I don't know how much interest they would have in it, but I'm just trying to get it to a point where I felt like I was comfortable sending it out, and not having in a blunder or something that's going to come back and bite me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's
Julie,
what I had on that chapter.
Okay, Julie, would your reference to climate change be appropriate under Chapter 1, Section 3 findings?
I was just going to.
Yes, I like that. Thank you.
Okay.
Julie, David had asked me to go back and throw in references to those findings, and one of them he mentioned specifically was NOAA, where they discuss increase in rainfalls amounts.
Yeah.
I'll get it in there. Do you want to put it into this section?
No need. Findings make sense. Yep.
Okay.
I guess it was just really became apparent it was missing by the time I got to chapter 3.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The references for the findings is on my to-do list.
Great. That's all I had on 3.
Yeah, I think it's important too that we talk not just about climate change in terms of the impact on the amount of rainfall, but that we're expecting to see rainfall more concentrated, which means we're going to have more baking of the ground at other times, which makes it less absorbent for what happens. So it hits it from multiple sides. I'm glad I'm older. I don't have to live through this. So, anyway, Chapter 4, Stormwater Pollution Prevention for Construction Sites, which I feel like is really important.
This is for the most part, Connie manages the construction sites out there to make sure they keep in conformance with their SWIP documents. And this is a tough one. We're trying to we're trying to change a mindset out there, and she's really struggling with, not very many of them are willing to change and go along with it. So I'm afraid this is going to be an uphill battle for a while. Fortunately, we've got IDEM on our side, and we're following their leads.
So this is an enforcement issue?
For Connie, yes. And she pulls me in when she feels like she needs a little assistance. They're required to prepare stormwater pollution prevention plan as part of their design plans.
Right.
And for the most part, that gets discarded when construction starts. We try to reinforce it right from the pre-construction meeting, pre-con, but Connie is wrestling with the contractors to adhere to it. I think
Sorry to
this
hear that.
And
section.
Terry, correct
this-
me if I'm wrong, this kind of gets into your transition plan of where and overall with the county, with our discussions with planning of an inspector. Is that not kind of fall hand in hand?
Good point. And this reinforces what my goal with the inspector. That person could work and support Connie when she gets behind on something, give her support there, and working together, they can do things more efficiently by looking at other parts of the construction and catching erosion control while they're out there and doubling up and working together. I don't think there's any issue that in a week we'll have a construction inspector busy with more things than he'll manage.
Wow.
I just have a question for clarification. In 1C, the penultimate paragraph, there's a discussion about how an individual lot with land disturbance less than 1 acre located as within a larger permitted project site is considered part of the larger permitted project site. What if it's land disturbance of less than 1 acre that's not part of a permitted another project site? In other words, what if it's just less than, there's some discussion about how large the building is, the disturbance, but is there clarity on, especially at the end where you talk about, the single family residential project, et cetera. I just would like there to be some clarity on at what point there is a permitting process required and at what point there isn't for the average reader. And maybe set that out at the beginning of the chapter or something. What's included, what's not.
Okay, we can see what we can come up with. I would say that explanation is standard that I've seen in just about every other ordinance, where if you're disturbing less than 1 acre, it's not required to get an NOI. Right, Jack?
Right.
If it's less than 1 acre of disturbance, you don't need an NOI. If you're disturbing less than 1 acre for your single family, you're building your house and it's in a subdivision, then you still have to follow the SWIP plan for the entire subdivision.
Right.
Yeah, and we also, Julie, the last sentence, or the second to the last sentence on the bottom of page 20 makes it clear that individual lots are required to submit individual lot plot plans, permit applications. So that's something new that Terry has talked about adding for each, so that if somebody wants to come in and build a house, they're still going to have to do a plot plan for that house. It's not going to be as extensive as a full-blown stormwater permit, but there are requirements that Terry is calling for, so that we can make sure that whatever they plan on doing is not going to create a problem for them or for anyone else. And I think the example he gave when we talked about this last was people just locating their houses in areas where flooding is going to be a problem or drainage is going to be a problem.
Right. So I guess that brings me back to that same point again then, because I think there just needs to be some clarity on, just at the beginning of this chapter, if your land is X size or smaller, this is what you're going to need to go through. If your land is larger than this, it needs to go through this. If your land, no matter what size, is part of a subdivision, you have to follow the subdivision plan. It just seems like that needs to be stated really clearly, because I just got what I felt like, although it wasn't, but it felt like 2 different answers. But I know it wasn't 2 different answers. So
We'll see if we can polish it a little bit.
Yeah.
I was gonna suggest, I mean, I don't know, like the line that you do have in that second paragraph, Dave, can that be moved up or modified to the paragraph above it that is actually specifically towards the less than 1 acre requirements?
Yeah, we can have a table if you want,
Okay,
like Julie suggested, that says lots, developments greater than X, developments less than X, whatever you like.
Kind of little check mark of, if it's less than 1 acre, this is what your required chart. Or
Yep.
this is
Yeah.
what you're required.
We could make a little matrix that show that clearly.
that'd be great. Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I just think there is, yeah, that clarity would be helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Visuals are good.
We'll do it.
Okay, chapter 5, stormwater quality management for post-construction.
My question here is about, because elsewhere you note the inspection and compliance factor in post-construction, but I guess there's just, once again, just looking for some standard language about what's expected post-construction versus when somebody's actually residing or doing business on the property. Is there a difference? Right, so there's a post-construction that happens when they're getting the clearance to use the lot for the purpose intended, right? And that's all that this chapter is about, correct?
That's
Okay,
post-construction is our stormwater facilities that are designed to maintain stormwater quality, and the accepted standard is 80% of the total suspended solids.
okay,
Yeah, Julie,
Using
I
that
think,
design standard.
yeah, I think
Go ahead, Dave.
one thing, Julie, you might be concerned about is what happens after the site is constructed. And that comes in on the technical standards. There's an operations agreement, I believe, that covers like
okay,
continuing inspections and so forth.
okay. Yep,
That's,
all right.
That's a good point, though, Julie. One of my pet peeves is we require these BMPs or post-construction facilities, and then we walk away from it and they're not maintained. And I'm pushing to get that owner to sign that document, recognizing that it's his responsibility, and that responsibility goes with that ownership.
And maybe that could go at the end of the chapter of chapter 5, just that point that systems will require.
I can look at it. We've got an appendix in the technical standards of several of those forms and stuff that need to be utilized.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to require it, it should be in there maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. That's just me, but.
No, I absolutely agree. I think there is a gap in a lot of these ordinance of kind of some of the operational growth, if you will. Now, I'm not saying we should manage businesses' growth like completely, but in certain areas, if they're like, hey, we're going to facilitate XYZ, and then they double that operation, that could have a significant impact on our stormwater. So I do think there's certain areas where we do need to monitor some of the growth. So, I again, I'll kind of reserve some of the business practices I think that we should, pay more attention to as far as their operational growth goes. And I'll put those in writing, but I absolutely agree with Julie that, after certain things are met, how do we know that they're not going to exceed in other areas? And I think there are certain things that we can write into the ordinance that could potentially make them go through more processes if they want to double their capacity of their, I don't, yeah, I'll go ahead and say it. Let's say it's a trash remote removal or something, you know, they're like, we're going to do XY amount of pounds, you know, per day, and then they double that capacity, but the building standards all still fit, but you know, the intent wasn't there. So I do think there's certain provisions that can be put in place to help control some of those operational growths that have significant impact on our stormwater and water quality.
Julie, let me offer another explanation on the technical standards. The idea was with the technical standards, things like the design rain amounts, that sort of thing, as they change, we can just take those to the drainage board or the stormwater board and have those updated. If those things were put in the ordinance, then it would be a little more involved to change them.
Sure.
And that's the reason I've got the tables in the back, so that I can modify them, add to them a little more readily.
That makes sense. And then individual plans based on whatever they're doing on that property, whether it be residential or business or what. Yeah. Okay. I like that.
What I need to be doing is I'll get you a copy of the this rough draft of the technical standards, just so you can get a feel for what's there.
Okay.
I'll get that out.
That'd be great.
Yeah, the section 1 of chapter 5 requires the post-construction stormwater quality plan. And then chapter 8 of the stormwater technical standards manual sets forth all the requirements and the testing and so forth that's associated with that. So there is quite a bit on that is not in front of you at this time.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, there are no other comments on chapter 5. Move on to chapter 6, karst and sinkhole development.
Yeah, this basically is taken the chapter 829 from the zoning ordinance and put it into the stormwater ordinance, and giving the MS4 coordinator the authority to check out any proposed development activities in that sinkhole conservancy area.
I'd also like to throw out that planning is going to keep the element of the setbacks for the sinkholes, the SCAs. They'll still define those.
Yeah, I think my thinking was that we would have in the zoning ordinance the statement, a chapter on sinkhole conservancy areas, essentially incorporating chapter 6 of this ordinance, so that it is still a land use requirement as under the zoning ordinance, as well as something in our stormwater ordinance, which is not a zoning ordinance.
I have a lot of concerns, and I do recognize the language is carried over, and I think I will address a lot of these concerns that I have about sinkhole conservancy areas. I think they're way too small, especially if there's a certain number of sinkholes in per acre. If there's 0.5 sinkholes per acre or more, that something else should be happening. When land looks like Swiss cheese, there's a reason for it, and we don't really acknowledge that in our zoning ordinance, nor here. And so I would like to key in on that as a zoning ordinance change that we can then insert here. But I have a ton of concerns that we are far too lax about sinkhole conservancy areas. I'm seeing nodding heads, so that's good to know.
Julie, I'd like to throw out an example. We had a couple of young kids coming in where they purchased a piece of property and they were wanting to build a couple homes on it. And when I went out to look at it, it was just covered in sinkholes. And what they did was go in and put all their SCA their SCAs on it, and then they were trying to wiggle in a home, and then they were trying to wiggle in septic fields, and I really didn't have a good way to say no, you can't do that when they fit them in between them. But this site was clearly, it should not have been developed, and I just didn't see that I had the means to stop them when they were, avoiding all these sinkholes, but there were so many.
Thanks for the example, Terry. I was one of the nodding heads, so I echo Commissioner Thomas's sentiments of, we have a little lax karst feature or karst and sinkholes ordinances where we've seen things recently come through where there aren't provisions or ordinance to point to. So yes, I absolutely agree with that.
May I ask just a general question? Does anyone monitor whether or not sinkholes are expanding in size?
No one from our office does. And
that's something maybe the inspector could do time to time. I really do feel like there's an inspector needed, and obviously you could probably fill their day up with 1,000 different things. But yeah, I think there's a shortfall on the way we monitor things, water quality even, and maybe sinkholes as they grow. So I haven't really seen too many things that deal with monitoring certain aspects. Sorry for the stutter.
Lee, you've been really quiet during all this. Do you have something to add here?
Right from the beginning, I was concerned about the sinkhole ordinance. I never really felt that it was adequate, and especially in areas where there are lots of them, but also I've witnessed some areas where buildings were constructed without a permit, and first you see one sinkhole beginning to open up and then a few others in the area. And I think we need to be able to probably even require when someone is built without a permit in an area like that, the building be removed or altered or something.
Oh, good. All right, on to Chapter 7, Stormwater Management Permitting Requirements and Procedures. Some of this for me was a little bit of definitional, like what is highly erodible? How do you define certain things that are in here?
Yeah, and we haven't gone through the definition section yet to make changes, but highly erodible soils are identified on our soil maps. For example, like Berks Weikart and all that, all the stuff around Lake Monroe is highly erodible. So that's I think what I'd call a recognized term in the field.
And they can be identified through SCS. They've got mapping where if you'll identify an area, it will go through and summarize the soils in that area as best they know. And as crude as their system is, that's the best that's available anywhere that I know of, short of going out and having a soils geotechnical engineer try to make an analysis.
I would like to suggest the idea of adding the best available information, because sometimes as we're utilizing more like a state level soil analysis, we do have local data. So it'd be nice if we can defer to the best available information, because sometimes what the state is providing us isn't necessarily up to date. So it would be great to be able to, point to both of those as resources, what we have and know internally, and then what the state obviously has as their, soil grid.
Okay.
For me, I would say that my concerns come in the post. I have others, but mainly on the post-construction side, starting 4E. Sounds like that's Dave's phone.
Yeah.
And on 4E, because we, post-construction stormwater pollution prevention plan, is that just post-construction or is that in perpetuity? Those kinds of things. And this idea of reviewing, I just have a general question. Is this also, that review is also in response to complaints? Is that true?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Julie.
Under number 5, review of individual lots and parcels. That's really for when the construction's happening. But my question is, is this the place to put that review can also be based on a complaint? Not necessarily that there's a permitted project going on, or is that for somewhere else in here?
In my mind, these are design standards. I'm not sure complaints
Okay.
are appropriate here,
Okay.
but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah,
Okay.
if a situation arises where somebody has blocked a natural drainage way, we have other parts of the ordinance where we can get on and inspect for those things.
Okay.
If somebody's doing something that creates an illicit discharge or anything like that, under the enforcement section in chapter 8, we can go on and inspect the property and do an enforcement action
Right.
for any violation of this ordinance, but also any of our other ordinances that might be relevant.
Right. So I guess I guess I would just ask that to review why there's a section 4 on approval requirements, which seems like a list of documents and studies, and then review of individual lots and parcels and why that's separate. I guess I don't know why there's 2 separate numbers, and if it's because number 5 is about small disturbances, then lots and parcels where disturbance is less than an acre may be the best title, and lots and parcels where disturbance is greater than an acre. I don't know. It just seems like there's 2 separate things, and I get why there are 2 separate things, because there's a different process for a bigger development versus a small disturbance, but that maybe needs to be in the title, just for clarity. And then I would just ask that, well, I'll put this in my notes. It's really a clarifying thing. I'll wait on that one. All right, good. I just wanted to point that out.
Do you think they should just be closer? Oh, hey, Terry, I saw that you were speaking. You're on mute. But Julie, do you think they just kind of need to be arranged closer, so you're looking at one and then immediately following that's the other, so then you can kind of identify which one's which, or just in the title?
I think it's the title.
Okay.
I think it's the title, because there's a big, there's a major disturbance and a minor disturbance, and maybe that's what we need to call it. Minor disturbance is this, an acre or less, or a major disturbance is more than an acre total, whatever it might be, or lot totaling over an acre or something.
Yeah, I think that this gets you back to that chapter 4 comment on the matrix, because that's what would separate these out. And I think it would make sense if you had that matrix. We could say see chapter 7, section 5 or whatever in the matrix, and that would clarify it perhaps.
Yep.
Let me make a stab at that. I think I can make that clear for you, Julie.
Thank you.
I did have a question too about in item 8 there, where it says manner and form of bond or assurance. Is there any recommendation for what will go in there?
Those documents are set forth in the technical standards manuals, the kind of forms that would be used for that. And so, and that's an area that you can have discussion on. Because, and that's something we've talked about in planning, having some discussion about bonding and so forth, where it's going to be 110% if it's going to be resolved within a year or so. But if it's going to take longer than that, the project might require 125% or something like that, because prices keep increasing. But the actual nature of the documents that are submitted as bonds will be in the technical standards, or the technical, the stormwater technical standards manual.
Okay. But it will be that 110% if it's 1 to 2 years and 125.
That's up to you guys. That would have to be a change to this, but that's something that a problem that we've run into where some of these projects have gone on for more than a couple of years, and the bonds are simply not sufficient enough to cover the costs because they weren't because they've taken so long and prices have gone up so much.
So are those numbers quantifiable, or is that just from your experience in kind of what you would say as a recommendation?
But that's just my experience. I haven't done a study of that. Okay. But I have gotten in situations where bonds were not sufficient to cover the costs.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is I would like to know what percentage is going to really meet what the county needs are. And if as far as your experience goes, that's I'll take that as guidance for sure. So if you feel like that's not enough, please just let us know.
Well, if you think that inflation is rising at a 3% rate, then those kinds of bond assurances should cover it.
Right, but based on what cost initially? Because if you're constructing, let's say you're constructing a subdivision with a bunch of 20 houses on it, and you have to put in retention ponds and all kinds of things. How do you know what the cost of the drainage is versus the cost of the other landscaping, road works, all the other things that you've done, right, to build out that development, that subdivision? And I guess I'm just curious about how we arrive at that initial number.
Julie, what happens generally is the design engineer will put together a construction estimate, and we ask them to break out those different elements. Because what happens, they'll come back later and ask for a release of a portion of it. And then that's when Ben goes out and inventories the roads, and I inventory the stormwater, that sort of stuff.
And I guess my other question then is also a philosophical one. Why are we only concerned for a certain amount of time? Because the rain will continue to fall and the drainage will continue to have to work. So why are we only concerned about a certain time period? And how does this fit in with HOAs? Are we getting a bond for an HOA even though the development was built by a company? How does that all work together? And how is an HOA held responsible for the things that continue to happen in the development once the construction's over, people are living there? How do we recover the costs? We saw one instance where we taxpayers bailed out a subdivision that was not pursuing and not maintaining what it had to maintain. We can't keep doing that, and it's not fair to the taxpayers because the developer is off whistling with, drop their money in the bank and whistle home. So how do we ensure that HOAs are set up to ensure that this maintenance continues, there's funding for maintenance, and that if there isn't, and we have to step in, the county, that we have the funds to pursue that and to do that? How do we manage that? Is there some kind of bonding we can do where we say now the HOA is getting a bill and now they have to pay that bill? Or I don't know what leverage we have. I guess I'm just trying to put all this together with some things that have been raised at previous meetings.
I think that's excellent.
Let me explain just kind of summarize the issue. And this is something everybody knows, but when the developer builds it out, he maintains control of the property in the subdivision until he sells out some 50% or some percentage, and then he turns it over. He creates and turns it over to an HOA. Once he's out, it's on the HOA to do that. But when he turns it over, there is an agreement by that owner, that developer, that he's required to maintain the post-construction erosion control measures and BMPs. But when that gets transferred over, the HOA doesn't realize it. And then what will happen is the realtors will continue to sell lots out there, and they don't point out to the buyers that they have HOA responsibilities. It just gets lost. The best thing I could come up with was to try and come up with some kind of an education process for the HOAs that are out there, but that seemed to be very man-hour intensive, and basically it's just an education form of education.
Can we require them, the HOA, to maintain a contract with somebody who will continue to maintain the drainage system, the stormwater system on that property, and to continue to meet the standards? And I guess that lays into the other question of at what point do we stop? And I don't think we ever should. As long as there are people living there, it shouldn't be a 5-year thing. This is a forever, in perpetuity thing. So
yes,
yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, we tried that with Fieldstone, and we required them to maintain a contract with, and they did it with Smith Newbecker for a while, or Smith Quillman for a while, or I guess whatever it was, the most recent one, Terry, but that didn't work out. And so we have in chapter 8, section 2H, about costs and abatement of violations. So if somebody violates the ordinance and we have to go in there and fix it, we can charge that to them. If they don't pay it, we can put it on their taxes. And we might want to look at that and see if we need to add any language about HOAs to say, if any of these things are on a common area, they will be charged to all the residents of the subdivision, something like that. But
yeah, I just feel like I don't know if what we need to do with this. I'm just trying to raise the questions that come to mind. And I know that Ms. Clemens raises this often because something could be affordable housing in an HOA subdivision, and those houses become very unaffordable if there's a drainage problem that's not addressed. And do we just go ahead and fix it? Do we go ahead and say, we'll maintain it? If you don't have a contract for maintenance, we'll do it, but we're going to charge you this much money a year to do it. And then we hire staff, and that's what they do. I don't know what the answer is, but I just wanted to get everybody's thoughts on it. See what my colleagues think.
I think we definitely need to start thinking out of the box. And I think both of those are excellent ideas. Even to the effects as something, compared to a legal drain, where if there is like bioretention on the property, that, some of that assessment goes to coffers that go to maintaining that, which could then be utilized by the HOA potentially, or by the county, and that could then incorporate more staff to go and facilitate the maintenance at hand. But yes, we have a huge issue with developments creating HOAs and then kind of moving it to them and then stepping away. And if something happens, the property owners are on hook, or the county has to step in and deal with it. And one of those incidents that we kind of alluded to, there was a major impact on homeowners downstream, which we didn't come in and be able to help assist them. We came in to try to fix the issue that caused them onerous burden. So definitely, as we're looking at this, if there's any way we could kind of put more teeth in our ordinance to deal with stormwater bioretention on subdivisions or development plans, I think this is a great opportunity to take. Because if not, they're going to just continue to move forward with these HOAs and kind of pass the buck, if you will. Now, everyone's not bad players, but there are a few, so we definitely need a few more options.
And
Yeah.
HOAs can be for commercial purposes too, right? A commercial development with multiple units could have an HOA as well, right?
Well, the equivalent.
Dave, Julie touched on something there that I think has some possibility. Can we write in the ordinance that an HOA, or if it's a commercial site, they're required to maintain a maintenance contract, or in some way demonstrate that they've got provisions for that to be maintained? Is that
Yes, I mean,
stepping
we
beyond?
can.
Or,
Now, we can do that. It's just whether it gets done.
well, if there's something in there requiring it, and then I get called out and I see that it's not being done, I can say, you got to do this. And that puts the pinch on them to get that under contract. And then then they have a contractor that will do it. And it's up to them then, they've got to come up with the money, but it gives me a little more teeth that I can say, you're responsible for this.
Yeah. And again, I bring up Fieldstone because that was kind of the situation there. And when we had meetings with them and said, folks, you're on the hook for this. I hope you realize that.
Yeah.
And they're saying, hey, we pay stormwater fees. What are those used for? So you're going to get it from the people on that point. So if that's okay, that's okay. But that's one thing we heard with the Fieldstone is they're saying, hey, what are we paying all these fees for?
I remember.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we could force them to have a maintenance contract, though, could we?
Well, if that was a condition of their zoning approval, then we can enforce that condition.
Okay.
But
So it could be like a commitment recorded with the deed.
yeah, that would be good to have that kind of language in there to say these ongoing obligations are going to be required to be put in the form of a recorded commitment or a deed restriction so that they are on the record. But Fieldstone all the Fieldstone agreements were recorded. So.
And Julie, one of the things I require now is what I'm referring to as an executed operations and maintenance manual. And that just has a schedule for maintenance and logs and everything that are required to monitor these BMPs. And I have those signed by the property owner, and then we record them. So we go that far. It gets dropped somewhere along the line when it gets transferred over to the HOA.
Right, but if we had an ongoing list of those that were required to have a maintenance agreement, then we would know, we could check on them annually and make sure that they were still doing what they had agreed to do in their commitment. And if not, then we step in and hire somebody and charge them for it.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's one of the things on my inspector list, just to do drive-bys on those things.
It could even be a matter of making phone calls to the people that they say they've contracted with.
Yes. And part of the O&M manuals requires that they keep logs that we can go out and inspect and see that they're keeping up on them. I mean, that's a big step right there.
Maybe we can make that electronic, so the electronic log is part of the permitting thing software, and that so that way all that information is in one place. And maybe that's something we can add to the OpenGov.
That would be nice. Okay.
Okay, Chapter 8, Compliance and Enforcement, and we're coming up on 4:30, and we've still got multiple things still on our agenda. So how are people feeling about extending the time?
I'm fine.
I'll be quiet.
I don't have much more time.
Okay, well, let's try to at least finish up the our stormwater management ordinance. What do people have for Chapter 8, Compliance and Enforcement? they're good. There are a fair number of changes here.
One of the things I'm looking for is a means for Connie to assess a fine if she has trouble with their SWIP stuff, or the erosion control stuff. And I don't think we've got that now. I haven't been back through Dave's edit though.
Yeah, if you want to do that, all we need to do is amend Monroe County Code 115 to add stormwater to the list of things that fines can be issued for.
I think that would help a lot. I'll get with you, Dave, and get something worked through with that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we've got our abbreviations and definitions, the appendices. Those, I didn't see changes with those really, so.
Well, there's going to be a lot of changes in there. Like I said, just, if there are terms in there that are not used in the documents, then we can take them out. Some of the definitions in here are just not clear, and we've changed. We've added the agricultural land disturbing activity definitions and so forth. So that's a section that we're going to need to go through again once we get some of these other parts settled in.
My one only comment is something we've discussed with our CDO is it would be neat as these definitions are being applied throughout the ordinance, if we could hyperlink them. So if we're talking about floodway fringe in a particular chapter, that it would then be hyperlinked to the definition, just for a user-friendly ordinance. Sorry, Dave.
No, yeah, I can't do that, but someone can. And also we could hyperlink to sections of the technical standards manual. I think that would be helpful too, to say, in some of these sections in the front part, if there's a requirement, say, see chapter 8 of the technical standards manual for, post-construction stormwater management plan, something like that.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
So what's the next step for moving forward on all this?
Well, I think Terry's going to go through the technical standards, get comfortable with that. I'll go through it for the non-technical aspects of it, just to make sure language matches up. And then we'd probably get it to the drainage board for comment and some of the engineering firms. Is that about it, Terry?
Yes, fortunately, I've just opened up some time here. So I hope to spend a few days on it. And that's what I want to do is I want to do the same thing as you people, read his ordinance edits, compare it to the technical standards, and try to pull things together, and work with Dave and make sure, just try to tighten things up in my mind.
So will we see this back again to vote on?
Yes. And at this point, I'd like to get into it a little bit before I try to set a date.
Fair enough.
If you don't mind. I see a lot of material here.
Yes. Very dense.
I just had one thing to go with this, that I literally made a Word document so I wouldn't lose my train of thought. I marked out everything. So the one thing I haven't marked out was maybe not our next go around, but do you think it would be beneficial to have a joint meeting with the drainage board, just to get their perspective on it too? They deal with things like this a lot, and I think it could be very informative to us to hear their perspective. Obviously, I'm a member of the drainage board and I'll probably be attending that, but I think a joint meeting could be very beneficial. I could leave it as food for thought right now for you. You don't have to necessarily, say yes or no, but if it's something everyone feels comfortable with, I think it would be beneficial.
I think I assumed that
It's
would
on.
happen.
Yes.
So
Lee, did
I
you-
just want to say,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
this is
No, no.
kind of how we went in the direction for our driveway ordinance and right-of-way ordinance. Dave helped us prepare some things, made some changes to help update it. Then we sat down with, I think, 4 or 5 local engineers. We went through it. We discussed different things about it. We agreed, we disagreed. But in the end, we all came to the same conclusion of what we wanted out of the new driveway right-of-way ordinance. So this is kind of along the same line of working with those local engineers, getting their input, and everybody being on the same page. So I kind of foresee that this was going to go into that same direction.
Perfect. Thank you.
I don't,
Very good.
I would also like to say that I just had a conversation with Siavash with Christopher Burke's office, and he's still on board. He was offering his assistance again, you know, if we had any questions or wanted anything from him. So we still have that support there.
Okay, are we
Yeah.
ready to move on to the individual plot plan permit checklist?
This is just I wanted to get this out to you because I've got strong feelings about more closely monitoring individual homes when they're being built. I have issues in subdivisions. I have issues in rural areas. It sounds a little cynical, but I think, you know, some of these home builders, they'll build anything you want anywhere you want it, and as long as they build the home. And I feel like I need to get some checks on these so that, you know, that we monitor and look for situations where there might be flooding. And most people think of flooding when they think of the floodplain in drainage basins that are over a square mile. But if you're not careful, your rear yard ditch could flood your house. If you're not looking and kind of reviewing the picture of what's happening. And I think requiring that is it's going to be money ahead for us in the long run.
And I do want to add, I want to commend Terry on this and bringing this to especially my attention on this. For the last year, couple of years, he's actually showed me pictures. He's gave me a great lesson on places where homes are built. And then he shows me the direction of the drainage and things like that were never taken into consideration of where these people build these homes. I think he's right that wherever a house can be built, a developer is going to build the home or a builder is going to build the home, and not taking into consideration of what the outcome of that might be. But I will say he has really opened my eyes on this topic, because I, as one, have never thought about that. I don't know that I would know, as somebody that was going to build a home, that would look into that in depth of, is this a good place to build it? Where's the drainage come from? How is this going to affect drainage? And I think this is huge in our county, especially with all the karst features that you were talking about earlier. So I encourage you to support this part of this, because like I said, Terry has gave me a big eye opener on how this affects a local homeowner. And over the years, I've listened to people talk about how Monroe County dictates where you can build, what you can do. This to me is an ultimate effort of protecting a property owner. It's priceless on if somebody's going to build a $200,000 or $300,000 home, that you can show that you need to take these precautions, or you need to make these changes in building your home to make it work, and you're not going to have a drainage issue. So I want to throw that out there, because that is probably one of the biggest impacts Terry has had on my knowledge of drainage. So
let me throw something out that I want to steer this a little differently, in that I want you to think about administering this. Planning administrator, they issue building permits, or building department. but there is, I don't know how many hundred building permits a year. If we're going to start requiring plot plans, there's going to be an administrative need there, and we need to be thinking about that also. And that leads me into a conversation of fees. How do we pay for that administrative staff? And these are all things that we should be thinking about and discussing in the near future. I don't have the answers. I've got what I think it should be, but I'm not sure that they're what Monroe County needs or wants. So, and I think, Penny, you sent me away a couple months ago to come up with some examples of other fees, and I guess I'm showing that I don't have that done yet.
But I live in town where we're covered under a lot of the city things. They let people build upstream from us on a creek. And so we flood more because of all the impermeable surfaces and stuff. And so I get impacted by this. I know exactly what you're talking about. And so, yeah, I really appreciate what's being discussed and what's being done. I would make one comment. I don't know what kind of logo the highway department's using, whether you're still using the red background or if you're using the bicentennial logo.
Lisa has corrected me, so
okay.
I'm trying to get in line.
Good.
Is this something that you might have some examples for us in the next month or so we can move forward with this?
Yes. Do you have well, that doesn't mean a whole lot to you. I have a nice plug and chug list on what needs to be included in a plot plan. And I have a couple examples that we pulled from another county that were relatively good. And I can try to get a few more examples and get those to you.
It'd be great to see what some of the fees are elsewhere and what the actual costs of reviewing these plans are and how we can, I think it's just the cost of building in this county because it is not a flat place, so.
Right, I agree.
I agree personally.
And it's a one-time cost. It's not an ongoing fee, so yeah.
And here's another benefit. That person builds that house. They live in it for a few years. They sell it to someone else. Then they sell it again. And that third person inherits the drainage issue that they had no clue. And all of a sudden they have to deal with it. And
but then we have a plot plan.
Well, that's how it shows up. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, yeah, that's awesome, Terry. I think it's a great first go around. It's definitely something that's going to really hold people kind of to their obligations. And I like it. I can't believe, Penny, that you recognize the logo too. I thought I was the only one that focused on branding sometimes. So yeah, great first go around. I appreciate it.
I thought it was very thorough in terms of all the information that you told people they need to be looking at. So, yeah.
Do you want to touch on Cave Creek a little bit?
Yes, please.
Julie had asked me.
Before we move forward, I just wanted to say one other thing is, I'm not sure, I think it was alluded to, but I think this is something that could be kind of pulled out and maybe brought to the board as an action item to move it forward once you feel comfortable with it. I would like to see it come as an action item so we can kind of move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to wait for the ordinance, but if something changes in the ordinance, we can change the permit process.
Okay, I'll push this forward.
Yes, good. So the Cave Creek, we had talked about this. We talked about this a little bit last time, right?
Yes, we ran low on time. And Julie,
I'm afraid I've really got to jump off. I've got employees here and I need to touch base with them before they leave. So sorry about that.
Thank you, Lee. Okay. Terry, you want to keep going, or Julie?
yes. Julie, you had asked me what came out of our study with Christopher Burke. And what I found out was the downside of it is, I asked him what it would take to add additional detention basins where it would begin to have an impact on the terminus of Cave Creek. And they roughly said it would probably take 3 more detention basins in the magnitude of the Fieldstone Basin. And that's just, it's hard for me to even think about that much detention. The issue is Cave Creek drains to the terminus and goes into the sinkhole. It's difficult or impossible to quantify it because the holes will open, they'll close down, they'll get brush in them, and the capacity at which it can take water varies. There may be an impact of groundwater coming up through the sinkholes and slow the outfall. So there didn't seem to be a solution. I looked at the ground around, and there's enough relief on the ground that there's just not going to be an opportunity to create 3 more sink or detention basins of that magnitude. I know that there was some conversation that predates me. I think when Fieldstone was built, there was an offer to purchase the 2 homes down at the end of the Cave Road, and I'm getting the second or third hand, but it was my understanding that the property owners declined. So they had an opportunity out and chose not to, as best I can tell. We talked briefly about the only thing that I can think might help, and it may not even be, it's going to be insignificant, would be to the area that the airport is farming. If that were to go back into legumes or something where the runoff coefficient would change a little bit, but in the overall picture, I'm not sure that would accomplish anything. I thought about going back to the detention basins up around the Cook buildings and see if they could be modified to increase detention, but it's still a drop in the bucket. And I just, out of all of that, I didn't come up with anything. And their recommendations, if you read the report, were not very, they were not very hopeful. I think the best thing to do is read my little summary. I took the time to write out and pull back all the things that I don't keep in my head. But the bad news is I'm not sure we can do anything, Julie.
Except to limit development.
Yes, we can limit development. And that's a good point. We could just put a permanent hold on development in that area. I can increase the discharge, or decrease the allowable discharge is what I'm trying to say. But that will stop any further development. But even at that, that's difficult, because if I put a detention basin in without the sluice gates that are in Fieldstone, it will fill up and drain back down, and will still contribute to the flooding down at Cave Road, because there's such a difference in the time runoff. Cave Fieldstone facility works so well because I can shut the gates on that and hold the water for 2 or 3 days until the sinkhole has drained down, and then go over and release it. A conventional detention basin, wouldn't have that ability unless I started putting gates on everything, and that would be I can see maintenance and management headache there, but that would be the way you'd have to do it.
And it seems that the berm system that they've talked about here really doesn't offer very many advantages for $1.3 million. You know, there's still flooding. It's just that the flooding is directed rather than diffuse, I guess. But It doesn't really limit it in any way in terms of the damage it can do, especially to the airport.
No, this probably the best way to do it would be just to purchase the properties. But Dave and I have had conversations about not wanting to go down that road, and he can tell you all the sound advice behind it. I can see the headaches, but because we've got these properties all over the county, you know, where do you draw the line? That's a real can of worms that you don't want to open.
But at least we're in recognizing the problem. Maybe we do need to stall out any future development in what would be an impacted area until some solution is discovered, which I don't know what that would be, but who knows? There might be a solution down the road.
Right. Well, in Fieldstone, I think Steve Smith went a long ways there. He created a lot more storage than he needed to. I think he had like a 73 acre feet of storage, and that's massive. And then I think that developer, if I'm right, that developer offered to purchase those two homes, which is another significant investment. But it would take, yeah.
So how do we get the ability to limit the development there?
It's in the ordinance now. We have a
Okay,
list of critical watersheds that exist now, and they are being transferred over into the new ordinance. And those are pretty much my discretion to limit the allowable discharge. And I would look for you guys if you want to say no development in that creek basin, or do you want me to restrict it? You know, cut the allowable discharge way down and require sluice gates or something like that, so that I can detain it for extended periods of time. Those are a couple of things I can offer and can do the way the ordinance is written now.
can you bring those to us as an action item for our next meeting?
Well,
Any input you can offer, Dave?
No, I mean, that's just something that probably is more of a zoning issue that we might deal with that way.
I was going to suggest the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I guess I was wondering, is if that has to go through the plan commission and then be approved by the commissioners, or is this just a stormwater issue, or how do we do this? What are our options?
Yeah, I think to limit the development of land, it probably should go through the zoning ordinance.
I agree. We could convene an ORC if this is something the commissioners would like to see by request from the Plan Commission, and discuss this and make it kind of limited. Outside of that, I'm not sure how we could really do it without passing this ordinance first.
there's Tron, even in the existing ordinance, there's a section in there that I can restrict the allowable discharge below what the ordinance dictates if the outfall point won't handle it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just how do we incorporate that, I guess, more immediately? And I would say planning would be probably the best route, unless you have another suggestion. Or do you think what you're saying already limits it?
I can limit it that way. Let's say a project comes in and the ordinance says this, but when I have the engineer, I'll have them do an analysis of the downstream outfall, and that doesn't have the capacity to handle that much water that the ordinance will allow. I can restrict them to a lower discharge based on that outfall.
So in a sense, they couldn't do the project unless it was like very minuscule.
I would be uncomfortable saying
yes or no. I get it.
No development, but I have no problem requiring them to detain to a lower rate.
So for this particular area, do you need to memorialize this kind of, I don't want to call it decision, but does this need to be recorded somehow?
I think what I might suggest is come up with a written policy for that drainage basin And then I would ask Dave, how do I process that through the stormwater board and or drainage board?
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
Yes.
All right, I'll pursue that. And I'm thinking for Cave Creek specifically.
Yes.
Others might come up, but we'll talk about them later sometime.
Right. I was gonna say there's probably others, but that's the one that's most immediate. Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order?
Just one question about rescheduling meetings to Wednesday. Donna, our secretary, had asked, do we need to take a vote to reschedule that, or are we going to be looking to make that more formal on our next upcoming meeting? How do we go about changing the date? Can we just change the date?
Since it was a consensus, it doesn't really require a vote, I don't think. Dave, am I wrong?
Well, that's one thing. You might want to just adopt a new schedule at your next meeting, which you've called
Okay.
for the 8th, I believe, at 3 o'clock. We can have a schedule for the rest of the year, but I would note that November 11th is the second Wednesday, and that's a holiday. So that would be, I don't know if you want to keep it on the regular day or the existing day in November or what, but we can come up with a schedule for the next meeting. And you can just adopt it then.
The rest
So
of the year. Okay, let's do that.
So our
Yes.
meeting will be on the 8th of July, our next meeting.
Right.
So all we have to do, okay, I just wanted to make sure that was covered.
Appreciate it. Good.
Thanks
You're
for
good.
running the meeting, Penny. Appreciate it. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Dave.
Oh, and yeah,
Hi.
Terry, great work. Absolutely great work.
Yep.
And Lisa, wow.
Thank you all.
One more
Yes.
thing, we do typically have public comment even after each item. I know that we do have a member, he may not want to speak today, but I think we should at least offer him the opportunity. He
Thank
stepped
you.
around through the whole
Yep.
thing.
But
Thank you,
Tron,
Tron.
I'll point out that we don't have to do public comment, and we usually do it on items with a vote. But yes, I'm fine with having public comment.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, thanks for the correction.
This is Jim Faber. No public comment today. I'll wait till next meeting.
Same for me.
Okay,
What?
Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Guess we'll see you July the 8th.
Yes,
Are you okay?
I'm okay. I'm up in northern Wisconsin.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, land of lakes.
Thank you for everybody for your hard work. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Dave. I think we're headed in the right direction. This is something that's needed updated for a long time. It's great for the community, and glad we're getting it done before Terry leaves.
Maybe he could just delay his retirement.
Good.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen.
I will make a motion to adjourn though, and thank everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.
Do I have a second?
Second, we don't need it.
Okay. All in favor?
Adjourn.
We're done. Thanks. Bye. Thanks, Hans.